Once we get the basics of worksheet features and techniques down, we usually begin to focus on the most efficient ways to get things done. That often entails looking for ways to reduce repetitive activities. Especially when it comes to Excel, macros are often what come to mind at this point. Excel experts tend to love macros. Those who don't consider themselves experts usually have one of two reactions when macros are mentioned. It's either a blank stare or a pale look of terror. Neither is actually necessary, actually. Macros are simply recordings of a series of actions we want to repeat. Nothing more, nothing less. Yes, we can and we do entire series on advanced complex macros. But when it comes to working with multiple worksheets and formatting, they are fairly straightforward. Using macros helps in our pursuit of efficiency and consistency. So let's get to it. We're working in the Basic Formatting Macros Workbook that can be found in your Chapter 3 Working Files folder. This workbook is used to track budget items for multiple locations in a business. What we need to do, though, is realize that we actually accumulate this information because different people send it to us. Maybe it's the location manager for each location. And when they send it to us, it's certainly not formatted consistently. We want to create a macro that will allow us to select all of the worksheets that we have and format them at one time. And we're going to integrate some of the other things that we've talked about, including the use of pre-built styles and custom styles. When you get ready to record macros, you need to consider what things will always be the same and what things will be variable. In this case, we don't know how many worksheets we'll always have, so we want to go ahead and group the worksheets before we start recording the macro. We'll click on Boise, we'll hold the Shift key, and we'll click on Seattle. Now that we've grouped those together, or whichever worksheets we want to use when we run the macro, we can record the macro itself. I always like to start recording macros by just making sure I know where my cursor is. So I'll just click on cell A1. In order to begin recording a macro, you can either access the Developer tab, which may or may not be visible. If it's not, you need to go into your Excel options and customize your ribbon so the Developer tab is shown. From here, you have the option to record a macro. You also can do this without the Developer tab by moving down to the bottom left side of your screen in the status bar and clicking or tapping the macro icon. We'll go ahead and do this from the ribbon. So we'll click Record Macro, and we have to start with some basic information, like what we want to name it. We're going to call this Format New Data. We want it to be short, descriptive, and it can't contain spaces. I'm going to go ahead and press my Tab key so we can create a shortcut. By holding Shift F, we create Control Shift F, F for Format New Data in this case, as the keyboard shortcut. This way we don't have to access the Developer tab in order to run the macro. We're going to go ahead and store this as a local macro, so it will only be available in this workbook. But you could also choose the Personal Macro Workbook to make it global, so it could be used from any Excel file that you have open. I also usually recommend that you add a description, so 2 weeks or 2 months from now, you, as well as others, can know what this macro is supposed to do. Now, once we click or tap OK, we're in recording mode, and anything that we do is going to be recorded. But that's okay. That's exactly what we want to happen. We'll do just a few quick formatting things. We know that we want to select A1 and A2 and apply a Heading 2 style. So we'll select the Home tab, move to the Styles group, and from the Cell Styles, we'll choose a predefined style, which is Heading 2. Next, we want to work with our labels. That's all of the labels that run across row 4. So we'll just click and drag to select those. Again, move up to Cell Styles, and this time choose our custom style called Column Headings. Now, of course, we could have also done this step by step, applying bold, aligning them to center, adding the shading, and rotating them up 45 degrees. But you can see that using the style even makes the macro faster and more efficient. The last thing we'll do is get back to just some basic old formatting. We have all of these values that actually should be formatted as currency or accounting. So again, we'll make the selection. And this time, use the typical formatting tools that you may be a little bit more comfortable with. In this case, we'll just make sure that we're on the Home tab and click on the $ option to apply the counting format. Because these are large numbers, we'll go ahead and remove the decimal places as well. Once again, I always like to place my cursor, so I'm going to click back on cell B1. Why? Because the next step I think people are going to want to do is enter the specific locations. Now all we have to do is finish our recording, and we could do that by going back to the Developer tab or by simply going to the bottom left side of the screen and clicking or tapping to stop the recording. Now, of course, the burning question I'm sure you still have is, did it work and how do we know? Well, the answer is you need to test it. Let's go down and select our summary sheet. I specifically did not select this worksheet before we began so that we could have a place to test it. We'll go ahead and run the macro. Do you remember the keyboard shortcut that we used? One quick press of the magic key combination, and voila! All of the work that, granted, took us only a few minutes to complete is now done in a matter of about half a second. Even though this particular macro is fairly simple, using techniques that even novice Excel users would know how to do, capturing the steps in a macro makes executing the steps faster than we could ever possibly do on our own. Don't forget, it also does some other things, like ensuring that properties like font and fill colors, borders, and all of those types of things are applied consistently. Aristotle spoke of appearances not being important for superficial reasons, but for what appearances represent about the inward significance. This applies especially well to formatting spreadsheets. Formatting doesn't change the value of the data, but it does help draw attention to relevant features about the data and its significance to the overall worksheets and workbooks that we use. You won't create macros for everything that you do, just like you won't apply conditional formatting to every cell or define styles every time you modify a format. But if you're going to use formatting to help show the significance of data, and especially if you're going to be applying it across worksheets and workbooks, then understanding and application of these tools becomes tremendously helpful. It increases efficiency, ensures consistency, while decreasing the chance of errors. Who would have thought a Greek philosopher from about 350 BC could make reference to something so relevant to formatting an Excel spreadsheet using a computer?